Everybody has the Tao, or the way, that's the way reality works. Everybody, has sunyata, which is pure syntax, pure cognition with no instantiation, content. And then you've got what the Abrahamic religions call God. It's all the same thing. But what are its properties? Okay, are its properties such that you can deny the existence of God? Or are its properties such that God definitely has to exist? And the answer is God exists. You can establish a personal relationship with God. We're images of God. You know what an image is? It's basically the product of a mapping. God maps himself into each human being.
Less than 5% of the matter that makes up the universe is directly observable. Everything else remains cloaked in mystery. This fascinating fact suggests the presence of hidden forces that transcend human perception. According to this view, reality can be seen as a system of interconnected mirrors, where each individual uniquely reflects the very structure of the divine. Some of humanity's brightest minds seem to sense the indispensable union of logic, geometry, and spirituality. Clues indicate that the cosmos isn't just a collection of physical phenomena, but a living stage where consciousness plays a key role. Following this lead, a fundamental premise emerges. To fully understand the universe, we must integrate logic, geometry, and spirituality into a model in which each part is simultaneously a spectator and a co-author of reality. One of humanity's oldest questions relates to the nature of God's existence. From the earliest sacred records to modern debates, the quest for an answer has fueled deep reflection. However, instead of confining this perspective to a single religious doctrine or philosophical speculation, a hypothesis arises that God manifests as the central unifying force at the foundation of reality itself. To explore this possibility, it's helpful to revisit the famous biblical passage in which God reveals his name to Moses, "I am who I am." This sentence not only underscores the divine transcendence, but also indicates that all reality depends on a principle of identity. In a similar way to how every object must be something specific in order to exist, God would take on the role of the essence that gives everything coherence. In this sense, the notion of identity isn't just a secondary detail, but rather the starting point for understanding the cosmos as an integrated whole imbued with divine presence. By developing the Cognitive-Theoretic model of the universe, CTMU, Christopher Langan proposes viewing God's existence through logical and mathematical lenses. Instead of seeing God as a being separate from creation, this model describes divinity as the very framework that makes the universe comprehensible. God, therefore, not only sets universal laws but also embodies them, acting as the supreme identity that maps each part of reality back onto himself. When someone refers to reality, they end up naming, however indirectly, this greater presence, because everything that is comes from this primordial source. This perspective is relevant because it redefines how we see the world. If God is the source that ensures the coherence of all phenomena, then every aspect of reality, no matter how insignificant it may seem, is part of a fundamental unity. Just think of a spider web. Every thread, even though it appears independent, forms part of a larger mesh, supporting and being supported by the others. The same goes for existence. Everything points to an underlying mind, a will that maintains the universe's connections, resonating within our very human identity. From the CTMU viewpoint, this divine identity doesn't remain static or distant. On the contrary, it shows up in every detail. If Einstein saw reality as a geometric stage, and certain philosophers described it as a vast text, the CTMU offers a synthesis that unifies both perspectives. On the spatial level, space-time geometry holds sway. On the informational level, codes and symbols permeate our thinking. Whether we're reflecting on physical formulas or on the language that gives meaning to our subjective experiences, we find signs of this supreme intelligence that structures the universe and maintains balance in every dimension. Some might question whether such an approach dilutes the figure of God into abstractions. Quite the opposite. By affirming that God is the identity underpinning every part of reality, divine omnipresence is reinforced while still preserving his transcendence. The Creator isn't confused with the physical laws, though he sustains them, much like an artist painting every detail of a picture without being limited to just the brushstrokes. Thus, God transcends the structures of creation, yet still inhabits them fully. Given these implications, the concept of divine identity is no longer just a religious metaphor, but becomes the foundation that brings together reflection and experience. Every personal choice, every thought, and every emotion finds support in this source of coherence. If everything that exists rests in this one who is, the search for meaning grows more intense, revealing to each individual that they're part of a far greater network of significance. This realization is the starting point of a journey toward fulfillment, in which recognizing one's connection to a supreme reality supports a more conscious and responsible walk. Many scholars compare reality to a text whose phrases and words appear both as geometric figures in space and as concepts loaded with meaning. Although this comparison might seem purely poetic, it reflects a synthesis that respects the concrete dimensions of existence and its deeper sense of purpose. Albert Einstein, by conceiving the universe as a geometric fabric, highlighted the action of gravitation and the curvature of space-time. Meanwhile, certain philosophers, particularly semioticians, viewed reality as a language of symbols and interpretations. Still, something seems to slip away when trying to combine these points of view. If everything were reduced to geometry, how would we explain the subjectivity of emotions? And if everything were simply language, what about the objective laws governing stars and planets? For the CTMU, there's an attempt to integrate both approaches, assuming that the universe operates as a simultaneous processor and display. The idea of a processor often brings to mind a computer that can read data, execute instructions, and produce results. While that comparison is helpful, it needs expanding. In the logical geometric view, reality itself would run itself on a deep level, weaving mathematical and logical laws into energy and matter. The display, for its part, appears in space-time, where each human being sees, touches, and experiences events. To illustrate, just picture a video game. The screen, which shows environments and characters, plays the role of a display. However, behind the scenes, a processor performs countless operations that govern the rules of the game. Something similar occurs in the universe. There's a profound layer, often associated with the mental or cognitive, that directs every event. Unlike a video game, though, each consciousness participates as a co-author, influencing the process even if unintentionally. This engagement helps explain why quantum physics places so much emphasis on the observer's role. At subatomic scales, particles behave probabilistically, waiting for a certain input to define themselves. Although this phenomenon seems puzzling, it makes room for free will and consciousness. Reality, therefore, isn't static, it's adaptive, and the observer plays an active part in shaping outcomes. This is where language becomes essential. Each mind interprets and changes what it sees, setting up a continuous dialogue with the cosmic framework. In everyday life, everyone interprets signs, codes, and symbols when reading a text, watching a movie, or chatting with someone. Each sentence follows grammatical rules, but also carries shades of meaning that only fully make sense when understood. In this analogy, the cosmic language would be a much broader set of rules and connections through which the supreme identity, God, sustains universal coherence. Still, each conscious being participates actively, inserting variables that make reality unique, both on the observable level and in unseen realms. The interlacing of geometric structure and universal language gives the world an unusual perspective, not just cold equations or random words, but a true logical dance. In this dance, every particle, every entity, and every idea fulfills its function, while consciousness produces meaning. Instead of there being a strict separation between the stage and the performers, a circular process is established where past and future blend into cycles of possibility. Every moment, therefore, carries limitless potential, because the boundary between the physical and the mental dissolves into a continuum of experiences. Grasping these nuances deepens each individual's relationship with the universe. Analyzing formulas or theories isn't enough. It's crucial to realize that everything bears a meaning, a divine signature. In this scenario, God doesn't remain inaccessible, but acts as the ultimate processor display, orchestrating interactions between forms and ideas. As a result, space-time isn't just the material face of reality, but also an expression of a supreme logic in constant dialogue with every form of life. This logical geometric fusion is no mere abstraction. It's a powerful interpretive key for deciphering both the external and internal universe. At a certain point, it becomes clear that it's not enough to contemplate a universe that processes and displays itself. We must recognize that every consciousness actively participates in shaping possibilities. This web of interactions only achieves its full meaning because there's a sensitive element that perceives and creates, consciousness, which is present in varying degrees in all living beings. It doesn't just observe, but also intervenes, reconfigures, and co-creates. To delve deeper into this, the CTMU introduces the idea of identity operators. In this model, every element of reality, whether a person, animal, or particle, contains a consciousness core that's proportionate to its level of complexity. In a mineral, that core shows up in a rudimentary way. In a human being, however, consciousness flourishes to the point of being able to reflect on its own existence. This advanced degree of self-reflection turns every individual into a focal point of possibilities as their decisions combine with cosmic laws, opening pathways that can't be predicted purely on the basis of prior events. As a result, the universe doesn't function in a fully deterministic manner because consciousness introduces free will. In quantum physics, the uncertainty principle, the superposition of states, and wave function collapse demonstrate that reality includes elements that are not entirely predictable. When someone chooses something, they add a variable that goes beyond prior causes. On this level, the conscious mind acts as a key factor, turning potentials into facts, even if everything unfolds on a scale that's almost imperceptible. Another recurring question is whether this free will only apply to human beings or extends to all life forms. It's worth remembering that consciousness, according to the CTMU, is distributed in varying degrees of density, depending on each being's structural conditions. An animal has its own mode of perception and choice. A human being has the ability to reason and deliberately opt for different paths. Still, the entire ecosystem participates in this network of interactions, both influencing and being influenced. At this point, the concept of metacausality becomes important, suggesting that the future doesn't depend solely on the past, but can also reshape the present. As paradoxical as it might seem, in a logical geometric environment, time may take the form of a loop, linking all possibilities in a simultaneous network. In this context, beliefs or future projections can work backward to adjust certain parameters, always subtly yet genuinely. Rather than strict linearity, a feedback loop takes shape, allowing consciousness to operate in multiple temporal directions, even if the ordinary mind doesn't perceive it clearly. When someone makes a decision, they're not just going with the flow of past causes, but also connecting to future potentials, choosing, by free will, which path to manifest. This confirms the importance of human beings, and other conscious beings, as co-authors in the universe's ongoing creation. Yet it's worth remembering that nobody acts alone. Every mind is part of a cosmic community where all intentions interact and shape the bigger picture. The sum of these choices doesn't cancel out individual free will, but does help form the overall outcome of events. This web of consciousness reflects the very essence of the divine, because, as we saw in the first chapter, God is the identity that sustains all coherence. Therefore, each being is a partial reflection of that supreme principle, possessing a degree of freedom in tune with the greater will. By choosing good, one resonates with that flow of divine coherence. By choosing evil, one experiences imbalance and brokenness. This dynamic is even clearer when one recognizes the responsibility of every choice, since everything reverberates throughout the larger web. Free will ceases to be an abstract concept and becomes a call to conscious, ethical action. Once we begin to understand the universe as a backdrop for possibilities and as a reflection of divine consciousness, the question of each individual's ultimate destiny naturally arises. If every creature is part of a logical geometric tapestry upheld by God, it's only natural to wonder what happens when physical life ends. Based on the CTMU interpretation and other traditions, the concepts of heaven and hell appear as the natural consequences of our freedom in relation to the absolute being. First, it's important to note that consciousness, understood as the image or fraction of God, isn't extinguished when the body fails. Why not? Because the core of each identity isn't defined solely by the atoms making up its physical matter, but by a divine mapping that sustains existence. Even if the body perishes, that fundamental identity endures, tied to the universal source of coherence. With that in mind, the unavoidable question is, what's next for this consciousness? Some imagine heaven as an idyllic place and hell as a terrible abyss, both either cut off from God's presence or filled with angels and demons. But when we look at these metaphors through the logical lens of the CTMU, we notice they point to states of harmony or disharmony with the supreme identity. Heaven would be the state of perfect coherence, a condition of union with God. Hell, on the other hand, would reflect the choice to distance oneself from this source, creating a sphere of inner confusion and chaos where the mind is isolated and shut off from the divine light. This understanding ties into the idea of universal coherence itself. Because God, by definition, is perfect, he can't contain contradictions within himself. Therefore, anything that goes against this perfection, through evil, selfishness, or systematic denial of goodness, introduces a rupture. Think of a musical instrument that, by its own will, starts playing off key while the rest of the orchestra remains tuned. Spiritually, this discord resembles hell, a state of self-imposed isolation where a being disconnects from the greater harmony. Hence, free will is vital. Each person is free to seek this divine coherence or reject it. This choice isn't trivial, since it leads to creating a private reality where the higher logic isn't welcome, or to opening up to the cosmic grand melody. In that sense, heaven isn't just a place of rewards, but the continuation of the harmony we already glimpse in earthly life through acts of kindness, love, and truth. It's a state of completeness where personal identity achieves its height in communion with the Creator. Persistently rejecting this communion through hateful, prideful, or resentful actions, produces an ongoing separation that deepens the sense of inner loneliness. This situation parallels what's called hell, not as an arbitrary punishment from God, but as the logical outcome of a conscious decision. The metaphor of eternal fire represents the pain of a being who doesn't share in grace, having opted instead for denial and chaos. Seeing heaven and hell from this angle makes physical death look less like a final ending and more like a transition where each consciousness confronts the results of its choices. Nearness to God brings a sense of fulfillment, while distance leads to emptiness and confusion. This perspective turns the destiny of the soul into a natural process in which each person reaps what they've sown through the exercise of their freedom. Finally, reflecting on heaven and hell highlights how crucial it is to keep our thoughts, words, and actions in sync. Every being senses a universal longing for a state of perfection. At life's end, two paths stand open: attunement or separation from the source. It's in each person's hands to respond to the divine call, strengthening the choice to align, or not, with that primal harmony. At a certain stage, consciousness realizes that the universe isn't limited to its internal laws. Spiritual forces also act, shaping boundaries of perception and action. So far, reality has appeared as a logical geometric system upheld by the divine identity. However, additional realms exist, populated by entities that influence this structure, such as angels, demons, and the figure of the devil, bringing to light polarities that underscore both God's power and human responsibility in preserving coherence. Take angels, for instance. We can think of them as direct extensions of the divine will, identity operators on a higher level, tasked with safeguarding universal harmony. Symbolically speaking, they function as messengers or bridges between the material world and the absolute mind, stepping in whenever something threatens the balance. Rather than winged stereotype creatures, it's more accurate to see them as intelligences able to grasp each situation in its entirety, steering it toward a resolution aligned with the greater good. At the other extreme, we have demons, which embody distortions and breaks in harmony. Unlike angels, who dwell in the original coherence, these entities need openings to act. Wherever abuses, manipulations, or corruptions occur, there's usually a chance for disruptive forces to gain strength. Thus, demons can be viewed as reflections of human vices channeled and fueled by spiritual influences that promote chaos. In a broader sense, the devil represents the primordial antithesis of the Creator, a core of utter denial that feeds on opposing divine perfection. Yet, it has no genuine coherence of its own. It's like a vortex that sucks in and destroys, unable to bring forth anything truly new. Its power largely depends on human failings, as it finds fertile ground only where hatred, deceit, and arrogance flourish. In this context, free will again emerges as the deciding factor, since every human being can choose whether to cooperate with angels or demons. Each person's stance, be it honest and compassionate or corrupt and malevolent, shapes reality, strengthening one side or the other. While goodness, integrity, and love pave the way for angelic action, dishonesty, envy, and resentment give a boost to darker forces. So, we're not just talking about an external battle, it's also an internal struggle of values, played out in both the social and spiritual realms. According to the CTMU's logic, evil doesn't exist as an autonomous being outside of God. It results from a lack of coherence. Wherever separation and selfishness take root, imbalance follows. This mechanism helps explain why some societies collapse through tyranny and abuse, while others thrive in pursuit of universal ethical principles. Everything depends on the collective and individual decision to align, or not, with the truth, justice, and love that flow from the divine source. On a practical level, grasping these forces calls for a more aware commitment. Knowing that subtler dimensions exist shouldn't lead us to fear, but rather to cultivate discernment. Every choice, whether a small everyday action or a major social responsibility, either feeds or suppresses certain influences. Where honesty and respect prevail, angelic forces find room. Where lying and exploitation take over, demonic facets prosper. The presence of angels, demons, and the devil, then, isn't limited to a mythic storyline, but manifests as real tensions within the cosmic language. If God, in his perfection, allows chaos to exist as an apparent opposition, it's so that freedom can be fully expressed. In the end, the invitation is for each person to use their power of choice to tune in to the divine symphony, bearing responsibility for every decision that upholds or dismantles universal coherence. When theories emerge that go beyond common sense, one's view of the world can change in a lasting way. It's not just about conceptual frameworks. These models are being developed through cutting-edge research and could reshape the way we interpret reality. Amid this whirlwind of ideas, a growing challenge stands out. Find out now what lies beyond your everyday perception. As logic, geometry, and spirituality intertwine, unexplored pathways come into view with the potential to spark scientific, philosophical, and personal breakthroughs. There's a real urgency to understand this hidden web because these ideas are already shaping the future and have major implications for how we live, create, and connect with the cosmos. Anyone who dares to explore these questions may not only discover answers, but also trigger brand new inquiries. After all, how far can the links between consciousness and the universe's structure take each curious mind? What disruptions and advances lie on the horizon? The puzzle continues to expand, extending an irresistible invitation to the next step. Anyone interested in deepening their understanding and alignment with divine intelligence can turn to regular meditation practices and daily reflections. If the content resonates with your personal experiences, feel free to share in the comments with the phrase, "It made sense to me."